Hi everyone, welcome back to the scene and Happy New Year's! 2025 is officially almost over. And I know that I usually release episodes on a Friday, but I thought that since this is a bit of a special episode and a bit of a shorter one anyways, I would release it today on New Year's Eve as a bit of a celebration of the podcast so far this year. So today is, as I said, a bit of a special episode because I don't actually have a guest. I'm just going to be talking to you, my audience, about the podcast and about some lessons that we've seen and do a bit of a recap of what we learned from the entrepreneurs this year. And then at the end, a little bit more about how I make the podcast and some behind the scenes stuff that you don't get to see. First off, though, apologies for my voice. I am a little bit sick right now, and I'm hoping it doesn't affect the audio quality too much. Okay, so let's get into it. I've given the transcripts of all the episodes we've done this year to ChatGPT, and it's going to come up with some points of interlap, things that we've seen a lot over the interviews because we've officially recorded 11 episodes now. And I thought it would be nice to do some recaps. The points that we see these entrepreneurs and these visionary founders keep bringing up over and over again. Point number 1, momentum beats clarity. We can see this especially in the interview with Rob Angel, the founder of Pictionary, which is one of my favorite episodes. So if you haven't listened to that, I would highly recommend checking that out. Kunal Gupta as well. So in Rob's case, he sat on this idea of Pictionary, which was originally called Charades on Paper for 3 years, and he didn't do anything with it. Once he got started, it was just writing down that first word in the dictionary. And from there, it was just momentum. And here's one of my favorite quotes from that interview, actually. One of my favorite quotes of all time. He goes, "What does an entrepreneur do? We just keep moving forward until we can't anymore." Oh, I love this. I love this line. It's just, when we think about, especially going into 2026, it's just you have to keep building. You have to keep building. You have to keep taking action and going for it. And I saw this thing online the other day, which really stuck with me. And I think it's gone around a bit now, so you've probably heard of it. But I'll read it. Thinking about doing the thing is not doing the thing. Planning about doing the thing is not doing the thing. Doing the thing, only doing the thing is doing the thing. Okay, that was a bit too many words, maybe a bit too twisty. But the whole point of it is that we can plan and we can think and we can ideate about something for a long time, like Rob did for 3 years. But it's not until we actually start that we can create that momentum and move forward. And this is what I've tried to do with the podcast this year, my own personal project, is just being able to bring that time of ideation to launch way down. And something that I'm personally going to be trying to do a lot more going into this year. We can also see this theme in the episode we did with Kunal. He didn't start with a perfect company. He started with 6 different messy experiments, and he was testing them, iterating them, seeing what stuck, what didn't stick. Same with Igor as well when he was launching his videos for the AI Advantage. He's putting out every single video. Every single video becomes a testing point. It becomes his point of data. And he's just seeing what works, what doesn't work. He's got 5 different channels before one of them actually does work. It's just that consistency, just starting, simply starting. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can put out work. Maybe it's not the best it could be, but if you're putting it out there, as long as you start, that's somewhere. Okay, next point. Validate the problem, not your ego. We've seen this a lot in the episodes, and if you've been listening from the start, this is something that keeps coming up a lot. It's you can have an idea, but you have to be able to validate it and be able to talk to people and validate it in ways that are effective and meaningful for your product or your brand, whatever it is that you're building. Recently, Dawn was talking a lot about this. You have to put it out there online. You have to be able to be willing to pay something, even if it's just $5 a day, $10 a day. Run some meta ads, run a campaign, run some TikTok ads. Whatever it is, you have to be willing to market to a group of people that you think will want your product. And you should don't go hyper niche. Start with a big group, see what sticks. Is it working? Is it not working? And then you can go from there. Especially now when we can see that there's so many AI tools and it's so easy to be a builder nowadays. There's Lovable, N8N, Replit, Rourke recently I've been experimenting with to create apps, mobile apps. It is just so easy to build, though, is what I'm trying to say. You can just put in what you want, and you can build a product up really fast. But being able to build is no longer the barrier to entry anymore. The barrier between who will be successful and who won't be in this age of builders is simply validating. You have to make sure that you're building something that people actually want, not just building something that you think will work. And it's so easy. Dawn was saying that you do have to be willing to put some money behind it, but I think you could even start from a free point of view. Run some videos on TikTok, see what lands, see what doesn't land, what's getting engaged, what's not, and then just go from there. We see this again in the episode with Rob. He didn't start with a factory, he didn't start with his massive game company. He just started trying to go right for the idea and validate it. He started running these playtests in his living room with his friends, seeing, is this something that people actually like, or am I just biased? You can't be so in love with your idea that you're not willing to consider alternate views of it. And so in Rob's case, people loved the idea and people were engaging with it, and so it was working. And that's how we started, turning this into a company and printing out the first 1,000 games. really fun story behind that again. I won't repeat it, but it was a struggle, and he printed out those 1,000 games and marketed them and sold them. But it came from that point of being able to test that idea first, and if people didn't like it, he would have pivoted to something else. Again, with Kunal, he sold the idea of reading on phones before the tech even existed. He was going to people, pitching the idea, seeing whether it landed, and if it didn't, that was fine. He would have pivoted and gone on to something else, but it did, and that's how he knew that that was a product that he had to build up. The lesson here is that shipping is cheap, attention is expensive. If you can't clearly articulate the pain, AI will just help you scale the wrong thing faster. Okay, next point is that curiosity compounds faster than talent. The theme, none of the guests were overnight anything. Igor, like I mentioned before, he started 5 YouTube channels before one finally stuck. There was years of curiosity in seeing what was new in the tech world before ChatGPT even existed. And this put him in a really unique situation because when ChatGPT did come out, he was able to jump right on it, experiment with it, put out a video right away, because he had the skills to do that. And in hindsight, now we can see where it's all leading to. But imagine that moment when he was making these videos, only 100 views, maybe 1,000 views at most. You couldn't necessarily see where it was going. And at the time, it just would have been so easy to quit. But if he just kept going, and when that moment was right, and when the timing was right, he was able just to get right into that and be able to put out a really strong video, which today is still up. In fact, if you go to search up ChatGPT now, you're not going to see Sam Altman's face or OpenAI. You're going to see Igor Pogani's face for that 3-minute video he created about how to use ChatGPT. Also, in Rob Angel's case, again, he read the whole dictionary back to front, literally. And I don't think anyone else has done that. And he did this not because it was necessarily the right thing to do, but because he was curious long enough. And he was able to build up this billion-dollar game company from reading the dictionary. So the takeaway here is that the winners won't necessarily be the smartest people in the room. They'll be the ones who keep poking, testing, and shipping while others get overwhelmed. And if you're just iterating at 2 times the speed of anyone else, you're going to be launching before they do. And then this just remaining curious, it just starts to compound. Point number 4. Leverage small teams or even no team at all. Okay, I'm actually a bit indecisive about this point because, yes, ChatGPT is right. We've seen this in a lot of the guests. Some guests really love building up these solo ventures with AI, but we've also seen other people who much prefer building with co-founders. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So I'm going to read the points that ChatGPT came up with first because it's saying that this is a big point of intersection in the episodes. So in Kunal's case, yes, I agree with this. He shifted from running a 700-person company to a solo AI-powered build. Especially with Pivot 5, which is his newsletter, which is now pulling in, I think, 1 million every year. You'll have to fact check me on that. If you listen to the episode, feel free to correct me. He's built it out completely solo with an AI and a stack that he's created. And now it's almost completely hands-off. In fact, AI does it almost all for him now. And that's how we can see the point of leveraging small teams over having bigger teams or a bigger company. Also, in Igor Pogani's case, he built out distribution first with his YouTube channel, which is a solo thing. And now if you've been paying attention or looking on my LinkedIn, which if you're not on my LinkedIn yet, please give me a follow. I've been trying to build that out recently. You'll see that he's built out this event recently with Tony Robbins and Dean, and it was massive. They had 200,000 people in the live stream. I think those videos now have over 500,000 views. And if you look in the very first video, there's a little snippet of my interview with him, which was a very special moment for me. So yeah, he started solo, and then he built out distribution, and then he leveled up with those events, which is still happening right now. Feel free to check them out. I've watched them and they are truly great. So the takeaway here is that AI didn't just lower the barrier to entry. It rewards focus and punishes unnecessary complexity. So I agree with all this, but I do want to make a point that recently when we were talking to Rupert, he has co-founded a lot of companies. In fact, if you haven't looked at his LinkedIn already, go over, take a look, Rupert Barksfield, go to his experiences, and yeah, you'll be scrolling for a while. I tried to make a timeline of it in my research process, and it's incredible. He's worked on so many amazing companies, but he always co-founds because he said, and we talked about this on the episode as well, about the difference between scaling solo and scaling with another person who can keep you accountable and help you grow. And it's being able to balance each other's weaknesses and strengths. AI lowered the barrier to entry to solopreneurs, and it's so much easier nowadays to build alone and have the skill set to be able to do that successfully. But at the same time, it just depends really on what you're building and the type of person that you are, whether you prefer a co-founder or not. Okay, the next point is taste is always better than tools. Everyone has access to the same technology, but very few have taste. Oh, we can see this a lot in Igor's episode because he talks a lot about the difference between exaggeration versus clickbait. Especially now on YouTube, I think that it's a bit of a shame because sometimes I find these really beautiful videos, really high production value, beautiful content, and they just cheapen it by adding these, clickbaity thumbnails and clickbaity titles. And it just feels like they create this beautiful thing and then they put cheap, wrapping paper and finishing on it. And it's something that I've been really careful to do in my videos after he told me that, or at least with the podcast, is trying to highlight and elevate the information that was within the episode, but not make it so clickbaity that it cheapens the brand. But like Igor said, you have to be the tastemaker, not ChatGPT. And again, Kunal, he uses AI obsessively. He has his AI clone, which I actually interviewed. If you do want to check that out, you can talk to him yourself and see how that goes. It's kunal.live off the top of my head, but he still curates, he still edits, he still decides. AI amplifies the judgment, but it doesn't replace it. And at the end of the day, you can have so much output nowadays from tools, whether it be images, text, but it's still going to be humans, at least at this point, refining it and being able to pick what is good, what is not. That's going to be the difference, especially when so many people are getting so used to AI. So many on LinkedIn, there's so many AI bot posts. It's really easy to stand out when you're a human writing or when you're a human selecting the good from the AI, if that makes sense. I take away from this, the edge is no longer knowing the tools, it's knowing what to ignore. Okay, again, apologies for my voice because I can hear it and it's not sounding great right now. I'm hoping you'll be able to understand this. But the next point is integrity compounds longer than hype. The theme is that reputation is the real currency. We can see this especially in the interview with Rob. He talked a lot about how he attributes Pictionary back to being able to be a man of his word. When he was in university, he paid his uncle back $5 at a time for student loans when he had nothing. And that trust, that relationship that he built, that's the reason why he was able to get funding from his uncle later and start Pictionary. A lot of entrepreneurs we've had on this talk a lot about this point of being able to make sure that your reputation, your brand that you cultivate is something that you're proud of and that will compound and pay off so much more in the long run. And those are all the points that ChatGPT came up with, but there is one more that I want to talk a little bit more about that really stood out to me when I was doing these interviews, and it's the fact that you have to be willing to make mistakes. I know that sounds cliche, but just hear me out for a second. There's a quote from Rupert's episode, which I really love, and I'm actually going to pull it up right now because it's too beautiful of a quote to butcher. Okay, I'm going to read you the quote. You're going to make mistakes through life. You're going to continue to make mistakes, but run towards them with gusto. Make the mistakes, make them big. Lose everything. Oh, I love this. This is one of my favorite quotes from the episode, from the whole podcast, actually. And it's so good. It's not only being aware of mistakes and not trying to just accept them, it's the idea that you have to run straight towards them. Especially, like, our whole lives being taught that mistakes are a bad thing and that we should try to avoid them. And then there's this alternate culture where it's like, find the silver linings and look at the glass half full. That type of thing. But personally, I think it's neither, right? If you're looking for the good in something, then it's almost like you're automatically saying it's inherently bad. And it's not that. It's that you have to accept that mistakes are a crucial point to success and you have to run towards them. You have to inherently want to fail, which is so counterintuitive. But if you're an entrepreneur, you have to really want that. That was the last point I wanted to make. But now, for the last few minutes, I do want to talk a little bit about my process of the podcast. Again, I do talk a little bit about this on my LinkedIn. I recently put out a post of some rejected names we had for the podcast, which is quite fun. I will link that in the show notes if you want to check it out. I started this back in August 1st, and my first guest was Paul Caffrey, so a huge shout out to him. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Since then, we've really grown this, and we've had a lot of amazing guests, and it's been an absolute blessing doing this. Like, I truly mean it from the bottom of my heart, starting this year, and being able to connect with you, the audience, just to have people that actually listen along, and they follow, and they rate the show. It's fantastic. It is the greatest feeling in the world. And I put up a LinkedIn post about this recently. I promise I'll stop trying to push my LinkedIn, but I got my Spotify Creator Wrapped, my very first one. So if anyone who doesn't know what this is, it's very similar to the Spotify Wrapped that everyone gets, but it's for creators that put out content on Spotify. And 10 of you, I don't know who you 10 are, but you are absolutely incredible. I love you from the bottom of my heart. If this is you, send me a message. 10 of you had The Scene as your number one podcast of the year. Your number one podcast, like more than any other podcast on the platform. So that was really big for me. And I know that 10 people doesn't sound like a lot, but it is massive to me. So if you're one of those 10, thank you. Genuinely, you made my year. And now I want to talk a little bit more about the process of the podcast. So as you know, I release episodes every 2 weeks on a Friday. Except for today, obviously, I did not plan that out well enough. But it started with this idea of what makes entrepreneurs seen? How are they building out their personal brands and their companies as they're scaling this? And what are the stories behind these companies that we've come to love and admire, the entrepreneurs that founded them? And the first step is just outreach. I do a lot of cold outreach. For anyone who does this, you'll know it's a long slog. But I do that, and then sometimes I'm able to meet other people through events or through guests who connect me to other people. And from there, once guests get back to me and we book a time, then that's when I start my research process. So my research is very extensive and very time consuming. Every episode, it gets a little bit longer because I really want to make sure that I'm fully prepared and that I'm able to pull insights in these unique stories I haven't heard before for these guests. And for me, that's what makes it so special is when a guest goes, "Where did you find that story?" So to do this, yeah, I guess I'll share the full process. So I start with ChatGPT. I do a bit of preliminary search with deep research, find out a bit of the background information on the guest. I'll have a look at their LinkedIn as well or their personal website, anything like that, to have an idea roughly of the companies they've created, some key points, headline numbers. Then I'll go over to Perplexity, which I really like for research. I prefer using ChatGPT, and I wish I didn't have to use Perplexity because I just don't like the UI as much. It doesn't get me, but I've still found that research, it's way more in-depth there. So I'll do some extra research there, and then usually it's just going down a rabbit hole of what other podcasts have they been on, articles that have been written about them, having a look at the sources that Perplexity, ChatGPT gives me, then going into those articles and just going down a full rabbit hole. It becomes a big spider web. All the points I find, I write them down in a little orange notebook, any points, any stories that I've come across, and then from there, it's brainstorming the questions. I do this in hand with ChatGPT, although I have found it's better just to create them myself. Sometimes ChatGPT will get on a roll and will have a good riff for a moment, but I write down a lot of questions usually. I don't send these over to the guest. I don't actually use that many of the questions that I write down in the book, in the podcast, but it helps me to prepare and kind of have a direction of what are the different sectors I want to be talking about on that interview. Yeah, none of the podcasts are scripted if you didn't know that. I just like to keep them as free-flowing as possible. Usually the guest doesn't know what we're going to be talking about specifically until we get on the podcast. And then I have the directions of where I'm wanting to take the podcast and different companies that they've created or different sectors of their life. And I'll lead it down one way, and then sometimes it'll surprise me and we'll go a different way, or at least I'll have those pillars that I want to talk about that will structure the episode. And then I try to keep the episodes around 45 minutes. Some of them do go a bit longer. And to be honest, I prefer those ones, but I don't know. Let me know if you prefer or if there's anything you want me to do differently. Yeah, feel free to reach out because I would love to hear from my audience. That's the whole process. I don't think there's that much more to that. And then on Riverside, oh, by the way, none of these are sponsored. I don't have any sponsors. Hopefully in the future, this is something that I do want to get into this year. But for now, none of the products that I'm talking about are affiliated, of course. But on Riverside, anyway, I take the recordings. That's where I record with the guest. I edit it completely by hand for the intros. And these are really special to me because they are inspired by Diary of a CEO, if you didn't recognize the style already. And I mean, these have gone a bit viral and a bit overused, but I quite like the style. I don't know. I hope you guys like them too. They're quite dear to me. So I read through the transcript. I don't actually listen to the episode first. Then I'm going to take any of the keywords, any key sections or highlights of the story that would be good for the introduction to progress the story along. I duplicate them, put them all together. And when I started doing this, I usually had about 1 minute of clips because I was reading through it quickly, skimming it, doing it at lunch in the summer between my internships and my jobs. But yeah, whatever breaks I had, I was doing that. Now I have the process a bit more down-packed, but it takes me longer because I usually read through really slowly, find any good clips, and I know what's working and what's not working right now, so I can find a lot of gold in the episodes. At that point, usually now I have about 4, sometimes 5 minutes of clips, and then I'll listen to it with the music and see if anything stands out. Then I just have to delete most of the clips, get down to 1 minute, rearrange them so that I have a bit of a story arc. I usually like to start with the high, I bring in the guest, talk about their achievements, and then bring in some low points, have the story arc, talk about character building, and then back up to where they are now, things that they're building, lessons that they have, and then always end on a cliff note with that final note of the audio. And then go into the episode. I listen to the full episode. I don't take anything out because I want to maintain the integrity of the episode and what the guest said. But I'll listen through, I'll clean up the audio. Hopefully this episode I can really clean up the audio of my voice. And then I'll take out any ahs, pauses, shorten it up because I am respectful of your listening time. And then yeah, I publish, I do the thumbnails and the titles. I've got a bit of a format for that now. If you're on, you can see it on Spotify as well, but on my YouTube, you can see maybe the thumbnails a bit better. They're very similar. I want them to be recognizable. I do the titles and all the posts, put it up on my LinkedIn, etc., and then post it to Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. Okay, there is a little small section I want to bring up on this in case I do make it a bit of a yearly occurrence. A bit of a fail on the podcast that you wouldn't have seen because it was right behind the scenes. On my episode with Egroup Hogany, the Wi-Fi went out completely. Well, first off, it was struggling to get it on when we first connected, and we were recording, I think maybe 15 minutes in, a fair chunk of the interview we were into. And then my Wi-Fi just went out completely. I couldn't hear him, I couldn't see him, and I could just hear these little snippets of him talking, and I was trying to be able to keep the interview going forward, and then just completely disconnected. And it took quite a while for it to come back on. Everyone was out of the house. My dad could not help me set up the Wi-Fi, and I felt really bad because it was an issue on my end. But ultimately, it did come back on. He couldn't see my video, but we were talking and we couldn't remember what we were talking about before, so we had to start the interview all over again. I was very stressed, but it all worked out and was a good episode in the end of it. That's it for this special. I hope you had a very happy holidays and going into 2026 strong. Before I close, I just want to say one last thing is genuinely thank you from the bottom of my heart to all of you who listen and who've made the scene your top show of the year. It means the world to me, truly, from the bottom of my heart, that I get to put out this content and that people get to listen and like it and they rate it and they follow the show. It's the best feeling in the world, truly. Yeah, reach out to me, probably best to do it on my LinkedIn, send a connection request, say hi. Love to hear from all of you. And thank you. This has been an incredibly special year because of all of you. As our final episode of 2025, that's a wrap.